Welcome to Easy Eats. My name is Chef Yves Duchesne, and today we're in the Greenwood Village's Learning Kitchen with Jeremy MacFarlane, co-owner and roaster of Freddy Bean. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Right on. So today we're going to talk coffee, and coffee talk, you always kind of need coffee cake. So while we're chatting, we'll make a coffee cake. It's the Danish who first started doing that, and the Germans started making coffee cake, or actually calling it coffee cake, something that would go with your coffee.
With your coffee, exactly.
Right on. So we're going to start really simple. We'll just talk about some ingredients. We'll start putting it together. And while I'm doing that, let's talk about coffee. So how did you get started with Freddy Bean?
I've always loved coffee. I've spent 15 years working graveyard shifts. I was a shift worker, like I said, for 15 years. And it was always difficult to find a coffee to get you to 6 a.m. So, like I said, when I finally got to the point where I was sick of working for other people and I was trying to find a business that I wanted to start, I'm like, well, coffee's a natural progression to over to my own business. So I created a coffee that would be strong enough to get me to 6 a.m. So, yeah.
And that's your all-nighter blend, or?
That's the all-nighter, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and then when we finally got around to wanting, like I said, if we're going to start our own coffee company in Fredericton, where there's already a lot of great coffee roasters, we got to kind of do something a little bit different, something that not everybody's doing or not that anybody's doing. So we did a little bit of research. We kind of took a look around to see what was happening in the world of coffee, and we came across barrel-aged coffee. So we're like, ooh. So we look, what's this all about? So it's essentially you take raw coffee or green coffee and you age it in oak wood whiskey barrels to kind of infuse the inside of a whiskey barrel into the coffee. Because like a green coffee is very porous. Like it's like a little sponge. It'll absorb whatever environment it's in. So once it sits in the barrel for X amount of time, it will have just absorbed not just the spirit like the whiskey or the rum that we use, but it'll absorb the oak from the barrel. It'll absorb the char from the barrel. So you get this very oaky, very rustic, wooden coffee. But it doesn't, like I said, the barrel aging process doesn't overpower the natural coffee flavors. It complements it. So it's something different. It's something that we looked all over the Maritimes and nobody else was doing it.
So you're the only one in the Maritimes, but is there anyone else in Canada doing it?
Yeah, there are. There are other barrel-aged coffee companies. There's some out west. Maybe something in Ontario. There's a lot down through the States. But yeah, nobody was doing it in the Maritimes. So we're like, all right, there's our hook.
So you're not. And I know I hear this a lot because I work with you and at the Northside Creators Market. A lot of people are saying it's flavored. It's not a flavored coffee, is it? I know.
I don't like the term, no. I mean, like, flavored coffee is like it's your caramel coffee, or, somebody that does like a holly jolly jingle jangler peppermint thing for Christmas or whatever. I don't like calling it flavored coffee. People do anyway. I'm not going to, whatever. No, it's not a flavored coffee. It's a barrel-aged coffee.
Barrel-aged or cured, I guess, if you're looking for another word to describe it.
It's a cured coffee.
Right on. So you don't just do your barrel-aged coffee as well. You've got other types of coffee you roast.
Right. I mean, when we first started, that's what we were doing. We were just like, and I was very adamant about this. We're a barrel-aged coffee company. All of our coffee is going to be barrel-aged. The problem with that is especially with a small business, we're not huge. You hit kind of a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And you can only produce so much depending on how many barrels you have, how big your barrels are, how much space you have to store barrels. So we're like, all right, let's offer a traditional line of coffee. So I already had I had my high octane all-nighter blend. So let's look at these other types of coffee we can do. So we've got a breakfast blend. We've got 3 single origins. We've got a decaf. We've got a dark roast Colombian. So all told, we got about 8 different blends.
Okay.
2 of which are barrel aged.
2 of which are barrel aged. Now, you're talking about different, like a dark roast and a medium roast. Do you guys offer different roast blends?
Well, yes. So for instance, the all-nighter, our breakfast, our house blend, it does have two different roasts in it. It's got dark roast Colombian, it's got a medium dark Brazilian, and it's got a medium dark Indian Robusta in it. And it's that Robusta is what gives it the old caffeine punch. You're warned not to drink an entire cup of it, which I did.
Okay.
It was very intense. I heard color. So yeah, we just use it as a garnish in two of our blends. We also use it in the Kickstarter, our breakfast blend, which has 3 types of medium dark or coffee in it, no dark roast. So yeah, so if you're looking for something with a lot of caffeine punch, we got you covered.
Right on. So talking about roasting, and you're talking about dark roast, medium roast. Is that how does that come about? Like, walk me through that process.
Well, it's just it's the length in which you roast something. Like, so when you roast coffee, you have to roast it to a temperature of minimum 400 degrees.
Okay.
Once you get to 400 degrees, you reach something that's called first crack. And that's when the moisture inside the green coffee starts to evaporate, expand, and break out of the coffee. So you're going to hear these quick little pops, and it's going to sound like popcorn.
Okay.
And then that's what's called first crack. At that point, your coffee is essentially done. That's when you can stop your roast. And at that point, you'll have a light roast coffee. Some people call it an American blend or a New England blend or a blonde. And then once you continue to roast, you'll get up to 425. That's another roast level. And it's all roaster's preference, essentially.
Yeah.
They can stop the roast whenever they want and call this my light roast, or this my dark roast, or this my medium dark. But then once you hit 450, that's when you get to second crack. And then that's the actual bean splitting open, the sugars pouring out, caramelizing, and then you get all those sugary flavors and textures, and then the cracking really heats up, and that's when you get to your dark roast. So that's when you get your Vienna, your Italian, your French, and then if you want to go beyond that to charcoal, it's on to you.
Right on. And what's interesting is you said when the cracks and the sugars caramelize. I was just reading about coffee before we had this chat, and it's called a Maillard reaction. And the Maillard reaction is the same that you would see in meat.
Okay.
So the caramelization of meat is turning those into acids, and
Right.
those acids into the
Yep.
coffee. So
Okay.
it's really interesting that it correlates that
Yep.
that caramelization brings that umami or that fullness in your
Right.
mouth, right?
Right.
Which is what the Maillard reaction does.
And then kind of when you get to that point in coffee, when you get to that 450, 460, you're in a lot of people love dark roast. I mean, dark roast is very popular, but that's kind of when you start to lose the subtle, like the natural nuance of the coffee. You start to lose like the natural flavors, and it starts to take on the flavors of the roast itself. So
okay, so you're manipulating it more the darker you're roasting it. Is
Right.
that what you're saying?
yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're getting away from the natural coffee flavors, and you're just taking on what they kind of call, it's now your coffee is now the roast. It's tasting like the roast itself.
We'll be back after these few messages to work on our coffee cake. Welcome back to Easy Eats. Again, my name is Chef Yves Deschênes, and we're in the Learning Kitchen with Jeremy, co-owner of Freddy Bean. Let's work on the coffee cake.
Coffee cake.
Right on. So, like I said, we're going to add a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon. We're going to add some cardamom.
What? I've never heard of cardamom.
Cardamom is kind of in that warm, earthy spice, so it kind of brings comfort food. So it's like in that nutmeg and cinnamon. It's an expensive spice, so you can totally omit it, but it adds that little simple,
Little
that subtlety, right?
little
Just
punch.
like you say with that barrel age, it just adds that little subtle note to
a little
it.
bit of nuance to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we're going to add the same amount, or twice the amount. So that was a quarter teaspoon of cardamom, and we're going to add about a half a teaspoon of cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
Leavening agents, so we're going to use some baking powder and baking soda for this as well. It'll give us that lift. And then all we're going to do now is we're just going to mix that together, so it's just one big
Happy family.
happy family married together, so you're not getting a little spot of cardamom in your bread or anything like that.
Right.
Next step is we're going to grab a cup of butter.
A whole lot of butter.
A whole lot of butter, absolutely. But butter makes everything better, right? And then we're going to
Except for in coffee.
Except for in coffee, you're right, but not in coffee cake.
Well, not in coffee cake.
There
no.
you go.
People are putting coffee or butter in their coffee now.
Are they really?
It's repulsive.
Well, I would imagine. That's odd. But teach their own.
Who am I to tell somebody how to enjoy their coffee?
Absolutely. All right, so to that, we're adding a cup of sugar. And then all we're going to do now is we're going to just blend it together. And I'm adding these at room temperature, and I want to add that because working with butter and sugar and eggs at room temperature, especially when you're baking, adds that lift, gives you that leavening that you want. And even though you're putting leavening agents in the batter, you want that kind of nice lift as well. So we're just going to, what this is called creaming it out. So you're just kind of whipping the butter and the sugar together until it forms a nice soft paste. And then as that's whisking, there we go. We're just going to slowly add a couple eggs, like one at a time. So you just wait till it's absorbed. Just like that. And we'll turn it up really high, and we'll get that nice and fluffy. And while that's happening, I'll add some vanilla, teaspoon. And then we're going to get the coffee incorporated into this. So I'm going to grab a half cup of your cold brew.
So this is cold brew, not coffee. This is
Exactly.
cold brew concentrate.
So tell us the difference between the cold brew and, say, a hot cup of coffee, other than the temperature. Of course.
Well, I mean, cold brew is it's exactly as the name suggests. It's brewed cold. It's never warmed up. But with cold brew, you brew it cold. It's an immersion process. You take like a giant bag of coffee and you just immerse it in water. You let it steep, essentially like tea, for anywhere from 16 to 26 hours.
Oh, that long, eh?
Yeah, and you leave it out in room temperature conditions, and we make ours as a concentrate, and then we cut it for ready to drink after the fact. The reason we leave it as a concentrate, it'll shelf life is longer, and then you can do stuff like this with it as well.
Well,
you
absolutely.
can bake with it.
Well, that's it. Is the recipe that I originally brewed a strong cup of coffee.
It says brew a strong cup of coffee, right?
And then I thought of it right away was use the cold brew, because I use the cold brew in cooking all the time.
Yeah, I use it for pancakes. I use it as a rub. I use it as a marinade. I do all kinds of things with it.
Absolutely. So I added your cold brew in with some sour cream, and that's going to be the liquid. And sour cream just makes sure that the coffee cake will be nice and moist and crumbly at the same time. So we're going to add this into stages. So I'm going to add the first stage. I'll add my flour, and this is just so I don't work out any of the air that I've incorporated into it. So we'll just kind of beat that in, and then slowly add our coffee.
Oh, I can smell it.
I know, it's great. And I'm telling you, the first time I tried your coffee, it was the cold brew, because like I was telling you, I wasn't a big coffee
guy.
fan.
I turned you into a coffee guy.
You did, just hanging out with you on the weekends. And now I drink my coffee black, like the best of them. There we go. And then we're just going to bring this together really quick. And that's pretty much it. We've got it there together. So what I'm going to get you to do
batter?
is spray that pan with a little bit of cooking spray. If you don't have cooking spray, you can just use butter and a little bit of saran wrap, and that works just as well. And while I'm doing that, what I'm going to get you to do is I'm just going to get you to add this brown sugar and this flour and cinnamon mixture to this melted butter. We're going to make what's called the crumble. It's called a streusel, if we're using correct culinary term, but
out.
And there we go. And then just mix that up into a nice. It'll look like a paste, but it'll cook up crumbly. Mix it until you have no more white left.
So should I be more viciously with this, or should I?
You can be a little more aggressive with it.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. While you're doing that, I'm going to grab this pan, and then we're just going to put the batter right into this, and then I'm going to set it into an oven at 350 degrees, and we're just going to bake it for probably about 45 minutes or so, or until again, a knife runs clean. So you poke it with a toothpick or a knife or anything like that. There we go.
Oh, that smells good.
It does, doesn't it?
No matter how long you work in the coffee industry or no longer, how often you're around coffee, you never ever get tired of that smell.
Well, that's it, and I think I like it when you roast on Saturdays, because when Saturday roast, you can see people just walking in and they walk right back to the back of the market. Right. And even if they didn't want a coffee, they end up buying a coffee.
Oh, like we have more people, like I get people all the time going, oh, I don't drink coffee, but I love the smell of it. I'm like, all right, cool.
So that's pretty good. So all we're going to do now, Jeremy, is you're going to grab that. And
there's clumps.
But you want clumps, and that's the whole point, right? It's the streusel. So all we're going to do now is we're just going to sprinkle that right on top, just like this, and that's going to give us our nice crumble for our coffee cake, just like that. Like I said, we're going to put that in a hot oven, about 350 for about 45 minutes or so. So we'll do that now. There we are. So, all right, Jeremy, you said that you were looking for something to do, a business of your own to run or something like that.
Right.
So you got into coffee.
I just did a ton of research before we sold a single bag of coffee. Like for the barrel aging, it took us 9 months to figure out. What size barrels do we use? How much coffee goes in the barrels? How do you cure the barrels? Do we get new barrels? Are we going to buy a used barrel from a distillery? We spent, like I said, 9 months to a year trying to figure out our process. And then just in that time, I met people in the coffee industry. I talked to people. I got a little bit of an education on roasting from a local roaster here in town. But yeah, no, it's all been trial and error. And for everything, from what I know so far, is like there's always going to be something to learn. Every day you learn something new.
Well, that's it. So. And it's nice to be in something. It's like a passion project. You just keep on.
Right. No, I mean, the reason, I wanted to get out of working, in my regular, you wake up and you're like, I gotta go to work. It hasn't been like that for 5 years now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I mean, I can jump out of bed at 5:30 in the morning and look forward to going to the shop.
To get your cup of coffee.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But how about this? I don't need a cup of coffee at my house before I leave.
That's fantastic.
I can wait until I get to the shop. I have enough energy, drive, passion to go to the shop and not drag my feet without a cup of coffee. I want to be there. So it's never been a slog or a chore or something I regret doing.
Well, that's fantastic. So for those of us who aren't lucky enough to have a coffee shop to go to and have their first cup of coffee, when you're brewing it at home, or if you're brewing it at home, what's the preferred way, or what would be the best way that you would suggest to brew it?
It's all really just depends on how I'm feeling. Like Monday, where the shop's closed, and I do get to sleep in a little bit, and I wake up. It's like, all right, well, how much am I just gonna throw some grinds in my drip brewer, or am I gonna take 6 minutes and actually do a really nice pour over, or am I gonna do the French press or whatever? It's all how you feel when I get up in the morning.
Right on, and we're talking about different things to brew your coffee. Now, is the grind the same? So
No.
if I go into you and I say I want to grab a whiskey barrel, can you grind it? I know that you always ask, how do you grind it?
Oh, I just use a regular machine. I'm like, great, I got you covered. I go back, grind it for them, or I use a French press. Great, I got you covered. I go back and I grind it for them. Yeah, you kind of get an idea. There's different grind sizes for different brewers, and yeah.
And what's the reason for the size of the grind?
So your grind size depends on your brew time, really. Say you're doing something you're making a reusable Keurig pod. Yeah. So that takes 30, 45 seconds to brew. So you want a finer grind for that because it's about surface area. You want to open up, if your brew time is really quick, you want to open up more surface area so that water that's going through it really quickly will be able to extract as much of the coffee flavors as possible. So if you're doing something that takes a little bit longer, like a 4-minute French press or a 5-minute French press, you use a coarser grind, so there's a little less surface area. So it just slowly extracts all those coffee flavors over a longer period of time. And that's why with, like, say, an espresso, espressos take, to pull an espresso shot takes about 25 seconds.
Yep.
And and it's like really quick, and it's a lot of coffee with a small amount of water, so you want a lot of surface area. So it's a very fine grind for that.
So Jeremy, can coffee go bad?
So once you roast coffee, what happens is that there's CO2 starts to leave the coffee. So and what that does is that's you want to leave your coffee resting for a minimum of 24 hours to get as much of that CO2 out of the coffee as possible. And what that does, while the CO2 is leaving the coffee, it's keeping the oxygen from getting to the coffee. So it's not going to go stale. So you get about from 1 to 6 weeks of peak freshness. Once you hit that 6 weeks of peak freshness, the peak freshness does start to go downhill, but the coffee's not bad. So as long as you keep your coffee in a sealed bag, you keep it out of the light, you keep it away from moisture, your coffee's, I've had coffee that's been 3 or 4 years old. So like the enemies of your coffee are light, moisture, and oxygen.
Right on. So the science of coffee with Jeremy MacFarlane.
The science of coffee.
We'll be back right after these few messages. Welcome back to Easy Eats. Again, my name is Chef Yves, and we're here with Jeremy MacFarlane, roaster of Freddie Bean Roasters. Jeremy, we were talking earlier about blends.
Yep.
Talk about single origins, and what kind of single origins do you have at the shop?
We use a Colombian coffee, we use a Brazilian coffee, and we use a Guatemalan coffee. I love South American coffees. Typically they're low in acidity. They're very chocolatey. A lot of them are grown in like a volcanic soil, so they have a very natural smokiness to it, which pairs very well with the barrel aging process. So yeah. Oh, and we've also, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be having a fourth. We have a very small micro lot of a wonderful honey processed El Salvadoran.
Oh, I'm excited. An exclusive here.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
Right.
Awesome.
Yay. You heard it here first.
So we're talking about barrel aged. I know that you source your rum locally. Who do you get it from?
We do. We use a local distillery called Black Galley Distilling. They're a wonderful local distillery. They have a lot of different types of rums and gins and vodkas. And we're going to be, we use their rum for our rum barrel coffee. And as soon as their whiskey is available, we'll be using their whiskey.
Oh, well, fantastic. I was just about to ask you if you were sourcing any local, but...
No, yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like, whiskey has to age in a barrel for a minimum of 3 years. So a lot of these local distilleries, their whiskey's not available yet. So...
You got to wait.
You got to wait. So as soon as their whiskey is available, we will be using it for our whiskey barrel coffee.
Well, there we go.
Look at that bad
And now
boy.
we've got a lovely piece of
Crumbly coffee cake.
crumbly coffee cake. You just grab a piece, and I'll grab a piece right here. Just grab it right there, and there we go. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jeremy.
Happy to be here, man.
I learned a lot about coffee. I'm sure everyone else did. And we'll enjoy some of this coffee cake.
Yum. Yeah, that's all right.
Good.
That's all right.